Good evening, this is War and Strategy Gamer. My name's Nick, and if all's going to plan right now, on screen you can see our latest project, which is a Universal Carrier Mk.II. It's a kit by Tamiya in 1/35th scale. The kit comes in two variations. This is the Forced Reconnaissance variation. The kit comes with two groups of brave British leads, Northern Europe and African. I went with Northern Europe because I've always been closer to that campaign. Maybe one day I'll do it. It ain't half hot here, mum. Diorama, and I'll use the African troops. But I'm definitely going to keep them because they can come in handy for a future project. I've actually just seen a North African Sherman that I might do one day in a model shop. So they come in handy, sort of standing around that, I guess. The look I wanted to go for was kind of a weathered look. I'm recently reading D-Day by Anthony Beevor, and in that there's a picture of Universal Carriers during D-Day, or the Battle of Normandy, and they had this sort of mud gradient up the side, so that was really the look I was specifically going for with this particular build. So I started out, as most model kits do, with sprues. I lightly coated them in Vallejo primer before sort of loosely following the instructions, but I didn't follow them to the exact T. Once I had the basic body shape, I took my military green by Vallejo. I airbrushed the main body using the most expensive and sophisticated airbrush known to man. Once I've got the main body sprayed in military green, I then mixed military green and reflective green, which is the green you'd use for European British troopers' hats, to give me a highlight colour, and I did a light dry brush just to bring up the highlights in the body, ready for the sort of the future painting stages. For any of the Universal Carrier parts still on the sprues, I did a heavy dry brush of military green and then a lighter dry brush with the reflective military green 50-50 blend, just as on the body to bring up the highlights. For the military figures, or the British leads, I base coated them in German camo black brown, which is a good base coat for any kind of figures you create. My old teachers in art college used to say that black doesn't exist in nature, and actually shadows are sort of a real dark brown, and you work outwards with your colours. So you start with a dark brown and you mix upwards to lighter colours. Speaking of which, right now is the detail painting stage. So what I'm doing is I'm painting all the detail in and painting the figures. With all of the figures, whether it be the skin, whether it be the clothes, I'm starting off with that real dark black German camo, black brown, and I'm working my way up through the colours. I'll show one of them on screen for you now. The rest of the colour codes will be on the PowerPoint slide at the end. I'll stick them all in there. And I effectively do one colour, a 50-50 mix of that and the next colour, then a pure coat of the next colour, then a 50-50 mix of the next colour. So I could be using upwards of 8-9 coats on a single piece of clothing. I'm effectively, each time I use a lighter coat, I'm painting less and less of the model, and that's giving me shadows and highlights. And I found we can actually cover up any bad painting skills with layers of paint, effectively. Thin layers of paint, of course. So the next phase is I go back to the instructions. I go through the instructions, through the sprues, make sure I haven't missed anything, clean any bits up, do any of the small bits, and then start looking for details on the model for me to pick up on. As well as this, at this point, if I haven't already, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a sticky white coat, no, not that, you dirty fellas, Vallejo matte varnish to seal in that first layer of paint, and also when I start to use washers and inks, etc., it's going to run off that matte varnish perfectly into the nice nooks and crannies as I want it to. So next I basically use Vallejo Game ink to make my own glazes, panel liners and all that sort of stuff. I either use a medium glaze or I just use water to water them down and use them as glazes and shaders. You can actually pay like a lot of money individually for those. You buy the ink, you just make them yourself, it's a lot cheaper. On top of that, I start doing the mud effects, and how the mud effect works is I effectively have this spongy brush, which I got from a pack of super cheap brushes. They're about £2 for 20 brushes, which are just good for dry brushing and things like this. And I just dip it in the paint, dip it on a piece of paper to sort of get the excess off, and then effectively just dab it on the model, and that's it. There's no sort of finesse required. Again, just do multiple shades from a dark brown to a lighter brown, and eventually what you're going to get is the effect that I've got here, and you could even get it to better, greater sort of gradients and blend it in a bit more. I didn't want to blend it in a bit more. I wanted to kind of make it look like maybe some of the mud was dry, maybe some of the mud was fresh. So I played around with it in sort of that fashion. I like the results. You may not. So, you know, to what's it? You know, to chef's taste, if you will. One thing that I didn't mention that absolutely deserves mentioning is when I put the decals on, I use Microcell Industries Microset and Microsol. Microset goes underneath, Microsol goes on the top. They improve adhesion and they also soften the decal. So particularly on planes, when you've got panel lines, it will sink it straight into the panel lines. If you're just starting out in modeling and you don't have a lot of money because you collect this stuff over time, I definitely think Microset and Microsol are something you should invest in over particularly weathering items and stuff like that. Speaking of which, you can actually mix Microset, or I have at least, with weathering powder with some success to sort of apply it to the model and improve adhesion. Obviously, if you use the weathering powder, you normally have to put a varnish on top, otherwise it'll just forever be coming off on your fingers or whatever, particularly with miniatures for wargaming. So the Microset sort of keeps it in the model. Or you can still varnish it afterwards, of course. And that about wraps it up for today. Thank you for watching. I'd love to know what you think of the model and my techniques. Let me know in the comments down below. And I'll put those paint codes up for you now. Thanks and goodbye.